Hello, Victor. It's me, Captain Logan, and it's time for your special custom video message just from me to you. Unless, of course, you're watching this at a restaurant and refusing to wear headphones and forcing everyone else around you to listen to the sound of my voice. Don't do that. Please excuse the obscene wait time on this video. I looked at the date of our original correspondence today. It's been like 3 months. I don't know where that time went. I have been obviously real busy with the movie and stuff. Time has gotten away from me, but it shouldn't have taken this long. I should have had this out a couple of days after you got top Superchatter goal originally, so I apologize profusely, but I am here now, and you asked for a somewhat intimidating topic, which I'm not going to lie, might have at least a little bit to do with the delay, because this is one I had to think about a little bit, and I don't want to make it lame. It also feels like a really cool video for the channel, and I might do some version of this down the road that I'm sure would have similarities to what I'm giving you right now. But again, this particular video, nobody else has to see, unless you want them to. So I'm pitching Batman as if you've never seen or read or heard anything about the character. Why is Batman worth reading? Why are his stories worthwhile? Why bother with that? Besides just the sheer popularity of it, the FOMO. Everybody likes Batman. He's ubiquitous. So, of course, you got to check that out. And the first place I would start at is just the provocative nature of this symbol, because not necessarily the laser disc inside, just the symbol. This, oh, that's interesting. The box is glaring off of itself. It's reflecting itself in the phone. But I'm being very distracted by that. This symbol is the reason I initially got into Batman in the first place. A story you've probably heard me tell before, and which I even put in the Superhero Rewind movie. But although if you know nothing about Batman whatsoever, you probably wouldn't have also watched that movie. This ends up being kind of a weird exercise. But anyway, I took one look at that symbol as a kid, and I had to know more. It's, like I said, provocative, it's mysterious, it's bold, and it's just a really neat image. And I fell in love with that before I fell in love with the character. There's something that just really draws you into the basic idea of Batman and everything that it stands for. And just looking at the symbol and the costume, you can almost draw certain conclusions about Batman without even knowing his backstory or his motivation or what he's really all about. I look at, and of course, Batman's been with me my whole life, and it's difficult to deconstruct my own personal interest and the process that led me to become such a gigantic Batman fan, partly because it happened when I was so young, and partly because if you love something for long enough, it's really easy to forget the exact things that drew you to it in the first place. I have this with Star Trek to some degree. Like, if I really think about it and break it down, I can explain to you why I'm such a gigantic Star Trek fan, and why I appreciate the optimism of that show, and the idea-driven nature of it, and the bright optimistic future, all of that, but it's just always been a part of me. It's such in my chemical makeup that it becomes difficult to kind of work your way backwards with it. But of course I will try. I think if you are not at all familiar with the character and you look at that costume and that symbol, some of the ideas that you might assume and be correct about is that that is a character that is a crusader, an avenger, not like from the Avengers, but a vigilante that fights crime and helps people, and has this drive and determination behind him. I think you can almost get at least a good degree of some of that from just the look of it, the sense of intimidation, of mystery, and of drive. Like I said, just the boldness of it. Now, could Batman have been a villain? Like, with that suit, could he be somebody's arch nemesis? I'm actually going to say no. I think the basic outline of it, sure. Like, if it's always in silhouette, that guy looks like a scary figure, like a monster. But if you really examine the suit itself, if you put some light on it, it's a guy that's trying to be intimidating. You look at the utility belt, you look at the symbol on his chest, especially when it has a circle around it, even the fact that he's not covering his entire face. Like, I might be reading too much into this, and there are, of course, villains in comics that don't cover their whole faces, but just with, and some of that, of course, is just the period and what got popular. But when you look at the basic like point in motivation, and of course you're supposed to not be familiar with it, so I would have to explain to you what that is. But when you look at what Batman is all about, he feels like a character that wants you to think that he might hurt you, might kill you, but that's all theater. It's all theatricality, which is a major theme in Batman Begins, and another big part of it, which that movie drives home real hard, is the idea of fear as a motivator, not just a crippling force. And so what Batman wants to do, and the reason I think he is such a worthwhile character, is he wants to take the worst thing, or one of the worst things that can happen to a person, and use it for positive effect. And again, I think there's a little bit of that you can kind of get just looking at the suit. But what Batman does is he says, okay, my parents were murdered in front of me, and I could take that and wallow in self-pity. And I think some people that aren't Batman fans kind of look at him that way. I don't. I could wallow in self-pity. I could go out and get revenge, kill the person that murdered my parents, or be like the Punisher, go kill other people that do the kinds of things that this guy did. Or I can harness my rage and harness my tragedy, my trauma, and do the best I can with my limited resources. Even though Bruce Wayne is a very wealthy person, he's still a human being. His wealth runs out at some point. He has limitations. A lot less limitations than you or I would, because it's a comic book and he's got to have cool gadgets and cars, and that's also part of what's fun about Batman, is all the accoutrement. But what's inspiring about the character, and the reason he's fun to read, or the reason I should say I've always found myself wanting to kind of live up to Batman, is kind of twofold. Again, he's got this drive and determination. He wants to be more than some of his parts. He wants to push himself past what a regular human being should be able to do, and his fuel, if you will, the kind of nuclear reactor that makes that possible, is the feelings he has about the death of his parents, mixed with fear of lots of things. In some versions, it's actually the fear of bats, like with like with Batman Begins. But a lot of it is the fear of failing, and the guilt he feels about the death of his parents, and so he takes personal insecurity, this inward feeling of sadness and anger. He takes an outward feeling of sadness and anger in the rage he has about his parents' killer, and he, as I said, harnesses that into something positive. So it isn't just you hurt me, so I want to go out and hurt you. It's this is I this is a feeling that could completely destroy me, and I want to be better than that. DC heroes in general are typically more iconic and larger than life and godlike to some degree than Marvel and other superheroes. And so they're characters that we're supposed to try to live up to as much or more than they're supposed to be relatable to us. And Batman is arguably one of, if not the most relatable DC characters, because to some degree we've all had some kind of tragedy or trauma, or at the very least something that has made us sad in that way, if not to that degree, angry in that way, feeling vengeful about something, and that is something we can all relate to. The less relatable thing, and the thing that makes Batman such an inspiring character, and this is the second point, is the idea that he never gets over it. And when something that traumatic happens to you, to some degree, you probably never do get over it. But Bruce Wayne manages to hang on to, at least in most versions, the same level of anger, rage, sadness that he had the moment that it happened. Again, that's the nuclear reactor. And his superpower, the larger-than-life thing, is not his wealth. It's not even just his ability to push himself beyond human capacity. I think these are related things. But it's his ability to hang on to that feeling and to use that so much as a driving force. So for me growing up, Batman was all about, again, drive. It's all about determination. It's kind of like the Green Lantern thing, the sense of will, which also comes up a lot in Batman Begins, the will to act. And that was a thing, not to get too personal, but because of some things I went through as a child with my own parents. They didn't die in front of me, but there were unfortunate things that happened with my parents, and they broke up, they divorced when I was little, and I think the connection I had to Batman had a lot to do with that. The more I think about it, is hanging on to that feeling and then trying to do what you can to make the world a place where that doesn't happen. And of course, that's an impossible goal, but the point of it is trying and seeing just how close you can get to that. And so that's why Batman's an inspiring character. What makes him fun to read and to watch, of course, is, like I said, the gadgetry, the costume, the atmosphere. Batman is a detective fiction. It's very often, I mean, one of the things that's fun about Batman, and I said the word ubiquitous earlier, is it can be a million different things, but at its core, it's typically detective fiction. It's noir-esque, and it's gritty, and it's mysterious. And So there is a fun kind of fantasy element that goes along with the very human tragic element. And I think one of the best things about Batman is that intrinsic link between the tragic and the hopeful. Batman starts in a very tragic place. In some ways, he never loses it. But the reason he does what he does is because he has hope that he can change something. And like I said, a lot of it for me is how malleable the character is, all the different fun ways you can handle it. He, at his core, is always going to be about what I just suggested, but you can do that in real dark, depressing, real rough and tumble ways. You can do a very hard R Batman, or you can do a real goofy, silly, over the top G-rated Batman, and everything in between, and he can still have that same spirit. He can still, at the core of it, be all about those values. And so on the one end, and you're supposed to have no idea what I'm talking about, but then you could go look at these things. On the one end of the spectrum, you would have like Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you would have something like 60s Batman or Batman Brave and the Bold, and it's all still Batman. And then the last big thing that people would point out to you in and I would agree with this, and why Batman is a fun thing to look at is just the world that he inhabits. Pardon me, Gotham City itself, and some of it is the kind of interesting question, the chicken or the egg of, does Batman create Gotham or does Gotham create Batman? Batman stories are very often about madness. It's about Batman pushing back against the criminal element that and corruption that caused the death of his parents. And if you push the darkness pushes back. And so there's always the question of if Batman is causing more problems than he's solving, which I've always found infinitely fascinating. Because on the one hand, you could say if he left well enough alone, it would stay at a baseline and not get any worse. And on the other side, the argument would be, if you don't try, you can never enact any kind of change, and the dark is always worse before the dawn. Like you're always going to, things are always going to get worse before they get better, and so it's worth doing. But Batman is, of course, a DC character, and he inhabits this larger world with all of these other superheroes, but he absolutely has a world that stands alone on its own and has an incredible amount of lore and mythology and history, and it's a world that you can really sink your teeth into, and whatever continuity you're looking at, but especially comics, because there's so much of it. It's not always consistent, of course, but because you have lots of different writers that will try their own hand at it and retcon things and start things over, etc. But Batman is very much like Star Trek in that there's this infinitely interesting world of characters to explore. And what I started to say earlier is people would point to the Rogues Gallery, to Batman's villains, as one of the reasons to look at Batman's stories. Because it's a colorful, eclectic assortment of characters that are many of them just as interesting as Batman himself, and I've always argued that each of them in some way or another is a foil or a mirror for Batman. And so you understand his character more through his villains, and so it becomes kind of a symbiotic sort of relationship. You need Batman's villains in order to define Batman and vice versa. And I don't know, he just has continued to be endlessly fascinating to me for all of those reasons. There's like a million other things that I could talk about, but I'm already at 20 minutes. What a neat topic. And I probably got a little bit too analytical for the exercise. I have a hard time not doing that because I've thought about Batman a lot and I think about Batman a lot. But the trappings of it are fun, but the psychology of it will both make you think and inspire you to take the dark, unfortunate things that have happened to you and do something with that, and also to push yourself past limits that you didn't think was possible for you to push yourself past. That's that's the point of Batman. That's why Batman is worth looking at, and also this is the greatest image in the history of great images. Viktor, thanks for your support. Thanks for being in the Writer's Workshop. I have really enjoyed reading your stuff and having you involved in critiquing everybody else's stuff. I hope you're able to make it to the next workshop meeting. I don't think we've seen you in the last one or two, but no pressure or nothing, but we miss you in there. And I just really appreciate you. Thanks again. I hope this was fun, and I'll see you again real soon. Goodbye.